Aqua has spent decades in developing and improving products for boiler water treatment. Our newest innovation, the Boiler Deposit Index program, will ensure our customers have a cleaner boiler. So, what is the Boiler Deposit Index program, or BDI? For many years, the approach to boiler cleanliness were controlling blowdown, removing solids out of the boiler, and controlling hardness, which was the main factor to hard scales in the boiler. And if we could control those two factors and add phosphate and sludge conditioner to turn scale into soft sludge that can easily be removed, that was the philosophy for many years. But here's the interesting thing. When we ask most companies that have the middle pressure boilers, and we ask them to be very honest about how it looked when they opened it, they would tell us there was deposition. It would be rare that there was a completely clean boiler, and it didn't make sense. So what water treatment companies typically did was focus on better control of hardness, better control of blowdown, and better control of phosphate levels. After a year, they opened the boiler and it still didn't look as good as they were expecting. We know why. In our intensive research, we found that in the middle pressure boilers, an important part of the boiler deposit that came out in analysis was iron. And it was always thought that this iron was just a complex of phosphate, and that phosphate was the biggest part of the scale or deposit along with some hardness. And the usual diagnosis was poor softener operation, or poor blowdown, or poor chemical feed, or a combination of all. The iron in the boiler deposit was largely overlooked. But here's what our research has shown. Iron can poison the polymer in a boiler water treatment program. So, think about the iron that comes from feed water, either from city water, or from the corrosion of piping, or iron coming back from condensate. That iron ties up or poisons the boiler polymer. And that polymer is there to condition the sludge so it doesn't stick to the tubes. So now with the iron poison in the polymer, even if you had the right hardness, the right cycles of concentration, and the right phosphate, the boiler still didn't open up clean. It all goes back to the poison polymer. So, we began to look at how we can tell whether or not we're going to suffer from a poison polymer situation or not. Through Chem Aqua R&D, we created a Poison Polymer Index, or BDI, Boiler Deposit Index. It tells us, based on the data we put into the program, whether the boiler when opened should be clean or not. So if you look at the BDI program, you can see we can put in different levels of feed water iron, FW calcium, and cycles of concentration, which is the blowdown. On the right-hand side, the bar graphs tell us if the boiler will be clean or not. If the bar graph is blue, it indicates the boiler should be clean, based on the data you have entered. There is enough polymer to overcome the polymer poisoning, and you will end up with a clean boiler. If the bar graph is red, we know there is polymer poisoning, and we will probably have a dirty boiler. Let's take this index and look at what the standard phosphate program would look like, something that has been around for a long time and 90% of companies still use. Let us see what happens as we move the slide and increase the calcium in the feed water. We see a change in the boiler deposit index. So at some point, there's so much hardness in the feed water that the amount of sludge in the boiler can't be removed through blowdown, and we will end up with deposition in the tubes. Let's look at what happens when you increase the cycles of concentration. The higher the COC, the less the blowdown. The more the sludge stays in the boiler, the better the chance of deposition. So watch what happens when we move the COC from 10 to 20 to 30. You can see how the bar graph changes and predicts whether or not the boiler will be clean. But here's the real issue. Let's look at half of ppm of FW hardness and maybe 20 COC, that's 5% blowdown. Look at what happens as we move the small amount of iron upward. We get to a point very quickly when standard programs fail. There is still enough phosphate. Blowdown is okay. Calcium levels not too bad. But why did they fail? Because the feed water iron has poisoned the polymer. Because of this research and development through BDI, we have innovated this product that has a particular chemical in it. It is more aggressive to the feed water iron than the iron is to the polymer. What this means is, this chemical is going to tie up the FW iron so it can't poison the polymer. So the polymer will be available to keep the boiler sludge from sticking through the tubes. So look at CA12160, which is the newest innovation. You can see that as we move the feed water ion up, that CA12160 can handle a lot more feed water ion than standard programs. And that is because of the chemical that we've added to the special boiler product. And with this R&D knowledge and BDI simulator, we can predict with a very good accuracy whether or not your boiler is going to be clean. And we know that switching to CA12160 can make a huge difference in the cleanliness of the boiler.